A Tuesday morning in Las Vegas, November 14th, 2022. The sun is barely up, casting long shadows across the Strip. Inside the Belmont Casino and Resort, most guests are still sleeping off their Monday night losses. The casino floor is quiet, just a few die-hard gamblers feeding slot machines in the dim morning light. In the maintenance office in the sub-basement, 3 floors below street level, a phone rings. Carlos Mendoza, senior maintenance supervisor, answers on the 4th ring. Maintenance. Carlos, it's Terry from housekeeping. We got a problem in the West Wing restrooms. 3rd floor, water's backing up everywhere. Chips coming out of the toilets. Carlos pauses, coffee cup halfway to his mouth. What do you mean, chips? Casino chips. Like a lot of them. They're clogging everything. Carlos sets down his coffee. In 20 years of maintaining casino infrastructure, he's pulled coins, jewelry, phones, and once an entire roast chicken from the plumbing. But chips, that doesn't make sense. Chips don't go in toilets. He grabs his tool bag and heads up. When he arrives at the 3rd floor restroom, water is spreading across the marble floor, pooling around the base of 3 stalls. A housekeeping cart blocks the entrance. Terry stands there with a plunger, looking confused and slightly horrified. Show me, Carlos says. Terry points to the center stall. Carlos looks inside. The toilet is overflowing with cloudy water, and floating in that water, bumping against the porcelain, are dozens of casino chips. Red ones, black ones, purple ones. High-value denominations. They're bright, glossy, perfectly minted, like they just came from the cashier cage. Carlos reaches in with gloved hands and pulls one out. A black chip, $100. The Belmont logo embossed on both sides, the serial number clearly visible. He turns it over, examining it under the fluorescent light. It looks real. It feels real. The weight is right. There's more, Terry says, leading him down the hall. Every restroom on the 3rd floor is backed up. Chips everywhere. In the sinks, in the urinals, floating in standing water. Carlos calls security. Within an hour, the casino's head of security, a former Metro police detective named Sharon Vasquez, is standing in the sub-basement staring at a clogged sewer grate. Maintenance has shut down water to the entire West Wing. They've pulled up the grate, and underneath, the main drain pipe is choked with chips. Thousands of them, jammed together like a colorful plug. How much are we looking at? Sharon asks. One of her analysts is already counting, scanning RFID tags with a handheld reader. Rough estimate, $28 to $30 million, maybe more. Sharon stares at him. That's not possible. I'm reading the RFID codes. They're registering as active chips in our system. But that many chips shouldn't be in the plumbing. They shouldn't be anywhere near the plumbing. Sharon pulls out her phone and calls the general manager. Within 2 hours, the FBI is on site. Within 4 hours, they've traced the source of the chips to a bypass pipe connected to the chip disposal system. And every forensic marker, every access log, every piece of security footage from the past 3 months points to one person. Eddie Morrow, plumber, 47 years old, 20 years with the maintenance contractor, divorced, drowning in debt. The invisible man beneath Vegas who was supposed to fix leaks, not create a $30 million counterfeit operation. Before we dive in, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to boost this story to more true crime fans. Eddie Morrow was 47 years old when the chips hit the fan. Literally, he was the kind of man you'd pass in a hallway and forget immediately. Average height, thinning brown hair, thick glasses, a maintenance uniform with his name embroidered on the chest. He carried a tool bag that weighed 40 pounds and smelled like pipe grease. For 20 years, Eddie had worked for Summit Maintenance Services, a contractor that handled plumbing and HVAC for 6 major casinos on the Strip. His primary assignment was the Belmont Casino and Resort, a mid-tier property with 2,000 rooms, 4 restaurants, and a gaming floor that generated roughly $300 million annually. Eddie worked nights, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., 4 days a week. While gamblers played and drank and celebrated or mourned their luck, Eddie was 3 floors below, crawling through service tunnels, replacing gaskets, clearing drains, keeping the water flowing and the toilets flushing. He was invisible, essential but unnoticed. The kind of worker that casinos depend on but never think about. His life hadn't always been so small. 25 years earlier, Eddie had been married to a woman named Claire. They'd had dreams: buy a house, start a family, build something that mattered. But life has a way of dismantling dreams piece by piece. Claire got sick, ovarian cancer, stage 3. The treatments were expensive and the insurance coverage was inadequate. Eddie took extra shifts, borrowed money, maxed out credit cards. Claire fought for 2 years. She died on a Tuesday morning in March, leaving Eddie with a mountain of medical debt and a grief so heavy he could barely breathe. His brother-in-law, Marcus, remembers Eddie from that period. "He just shut down," Marcus said in an interview after Eddie's disappearance. "He went to work, came home, slept, repeat. He didn't talk to anyone, didn't go out. He'd show up at family dinners and just sit there like a ghost." The divorce came 3 years after Claire's death. Eddie's second wife, a woman named Jennifer he'd met at a support group, couldn't handle his emotional distance. She left after 18 months of marriage, taking half of what little he had left. By 2020, Eddie was 45 years old, living in a one-bedroom apartment in Henderson that smelled like cigarettes and old carpet. His paycheck barely covered rent and minimum credit card payments. He owed $78,000 to various creditors. His car was 12 years old and needed a new transmission he couldn't afford. He was, by every measure, drowning. But Eddie had one thing going for him. He understood systems. Not just plumbing systems, but how things worked beneath the surface. How casinos moved money. How chips were tracked and accounted for. How the invisible infrastructure of Vegas kept billions of dollars flowing smoothly. For 20 years, Eddie had crawled through the arteries of the casino industry. He'd seen the cash counting rooms. He'd repaired vaults. He'd cleared chip disposal drains. He'd watched millions of dollars move through pipes and tunnels and secure corridors, just inches away from his hands but completely untouchable. Until one day he realized those same pipes could move something else, something that looked real but wasn't, something he could create. And that's when the quiet plumber who fixed everyone's problems but never his own decided to fix the biggest problem in his life: money. The idea came to Eddie on a Sunday morning in March 2021. He was replacing a broken drain in a men's restroom on the casino floor, second level, near the high-limit poker room. It was routine work. A drain had cracked, probably from someone dropping something heavy. Casino management wanted it fixed immediately because anything that disrupted the gaming floor cost money. Eddie had shut off the water, pulled up the drain cover, and started disconnecting the old pipe when he noticed something strange. The drain wasn't a standard waste pipe. It was a chip disposal chute, a specialized system that some casinos use to destroy damaged or outdated chips. The system was simple. Dealers would drop defective chips into a small slot at their stations. The chips would fall through a network of tubes and end up in this drain, where they were supposed to be shredded by a small grinder before being flushed into the main sewer system. Out of circulation, destroyed, accounted for. But when Eddie opened the access panel, he saw that the grinder had been broken for months, maybe years. Nobody had noticed. Nobody had fixed it. The chips were just falling through the chute, hitting water and washing away whole. Eddie reached into the standing water and pulled out a handful of wet casino chips. Red $5 chips, green $25 chips, a few black $100 chips, all of them intact. All of them technically still active in the casino's inventory system because they'd never been properly destroyed. He stared at them for a long time, water dripping from his gloved hands. A thought formed. Slow at first, then faster. If the system couldn't tell the difference between destroyed chips and active chips, if broken equipment meant chips were entering the waste system while still registering as valid, then theoretically, someone could introduce fake chips into the same system and they'd register as real. Eddie pocketed 3 chips, a red 5, a green 25, a black 100. He finished the repair, filed his work order, clocked out, and went home. In his apartment, Eddie laid the chips on his kitchen table under a desk lamp. He examined them with the focus of a man who had nothing left to lose. The chips were made of clay composite with a metal RFID tag embedded in the center. The Belmont logo was embossed on both sides. The edges had a crosshatch pattern for texture. The serial numbers were printed in UV reactive ink that showed up under black light. He took photos from every angle. He measured the diameter, thickness, and weight. He looked up the manufacturer. Most casinos sourced their chips from one of three factories, two in the United States and one in Macau. The Belmont used chips from the Macau factory, a mid-range design that balanced security features with cost. Eddie spent the next 3 weeks researching. He learned about RFID encoding, UV printing, resin molding. He watched YouTube videos on counterfeiting, though most of them were about fake currency, not casino chips. He read forums where collectors traded stories about rare chips and discussed how to authenticate them. The more he learned, the more he realized something crucial. Casino chip security was designed to prevent customers from counterfeiting chips and bringing them onto the floor. But it wasn't designed to prevent chips from being introduced through the maintenance infrastructure. Why would it be? Who would think to counterfeit chips through the plumbing? Eddie ordered a 3D resin printer online. $400 on a credit card he could barely afford. He ordered UV reactive ink, RFID tags, and molding resin, another $600. He watched tutorials on 3D modeling and taught himself basic design software. In his garage, under a single bare bulb, Eddie Morrow began creating the perfect counterfeit casino chip. The first prototype was terrible. The weight was wrong. The texture was too smooth. The logo was slightly off-center. Eddie threw it away and started over. The second prototype was better. The weight was close. The embossing looked decent under normal light. But under UV light, the serial number glowed the wrong shade of blue. The third prototype was nearly perfect. Eddie held it next to a real chip and couldn't tell the difference. Same weight, same texture, same logo alignment. The UV serial number glowed the right shade. The RFID tag, which he'd programmed using a cheap encoder, transmitted a valid signal. But there was still a problem. The RFID serial number was random. It didn't match any chip in the Belmont's active inventory. If anyone scanned it carefully, they'd see it was fake. Eddie needed access to real serial numbers. Numbers that were supposed to be destroyed, but were still in the system. And that's when he realized he already had access. Through the chip disposal system. Every 2 weeks, the Belmont flushed batches of defective chips through the disposal chute. Damaged chips. Outdated designs. Chips that were supposed to be destroyed. But because the grinder was broken, those chips were passing through whole, still carrying their RFID tags, still registered as active in the casino's inventory until someone manually removed them from the database. There was a window, a gap between physical destruction and digital deletion, and Eddie could exploit that gap. He started documenting the disposal schedule. Every other Thursday at 3 a.m., maintenance flushed a batch of chips. Eddie would be working that shift. He had access to the disposal system. He could intercept the chips, scan their RFID codes, and then replace them with his counterfeits carrying the same codes. The real chips would never make it to the sewer. The fake chips would enter circulation, carrying legitimate serial numbers. The casino's inventory system would see valid codes and accept them as real. Eddie wasn't hacking computers. He was hacking the plumbing. The first swap happened on a Thursday in June. Eddie waited until his supervisor, Carlos, went on break. He accessed the disposal chute, pulled out 30 chips that were supposed to be destroyed, scanned their RFID codes, and replaced them with 30 of his counterfeits encoded with those same codes. The real chips went into his tool bag. The fake chips flushed into the system. The next day, Eddie brought one of his counterfeits to a different casino across town, the Golden Palace. He bought into a low-stakes poker game with cash, played for an hour, then cashed out his chips, including the counterfeit. The cashier scanned it. The system accepted it. Eddie walked out with real money. It worked. For the next month, Eddie refined his process. He improved his printing technique. He perfected the RFID encoding. He built a small bypass pipe in the disposal system, a hidden junction that let him swap chips without anyone noticing. Every 2 weeks, he'd intercept a batch of disposal chips, replace them with counterfeits, and pocket the real ones to study and improve his fakes. But Eddie couldn't cache large quantities of chips himself. That would draw attention. A plumber suddenly showing up at cashier cages with thousands in chips? Red flag. He needed help. He needed people who could move the chips without suspicion. So Eddie recruited a team. 3 people he'd known for years. People he trusted. People who needed money as badly as he did. The first recruit was Nicole Chen, a bartender at the Belmont. Nicole was 32, single mother of 2, working 2 jobs to make rent. She'd been a cocktail waitress on the casino floor for 6 years before moving to the bar to avoid the late-night drunk gamblers. She was smart, tough, and tired of being broke. Eddie approached her on a smoke break behind the employee parking structure. They'd known each other casually for years, the kind of workplace acquaintance where you know someone's name and basic story, but not much else. "I need your help with something," Eddie said, lighting a cigarette. "Something that could make us both a lot of money." Nicole looked at him skeptically. "What kind of help?" "The quiet kind. The don't ask too many questions kind." "I'm listening." Eddie explained vaguely that he had access to casino chips that needed to be cashed without drawing attention. Small batches, nothing huge. He'd give her chips. She'd cash them at closing time when she was already handling money, blend them in with tips and game payouts. She'd keep 20% of whatever she moved. "Where are the chips coming from?" Nicole asked. "Does it matter?" "It does if we're going to get caught." "We won't get caught. The chips are real, scanned and verified. I just need someone who can move them without raising flags." Nicole thought about her kids, about the rent that was 2 weeks overdue, about the car that needed new brakes, about working until midnight and waking up at 6 a.m. to do it all again. 25%, she said. "Deal." The second recruit was Thomas Webb, a retired slot attendant who'd worked at various strip casinos for 30 years before getting laid off during COVID. Tom was 61, living on an inadequate pension, and spending most of his days at his old haunts playing penny slots and nursing cheap beer. He knew every machine, every shift manager, every loophole in casino operations. Eddie found him at the Stardust one afternoon, sitting at a video poker machine with his 3rd beer. "Tom, I got a proposition for you." Tom looked up, bloodshot eyes focusing slowly. "Eddie, hell you doing here?" "Making money. You want in?" Over the next 20 minutes, Eddie explained what he needed. Someone to move chips between machines, blur the trail, make it look like normal gameplay. Tom would take chips, feed them into slots, play for a bit, cash out, move to another casino, repeat. Keep 15%. Tom listened, sipped his beer, and finally nodded. "I'm in, but I'm keeping 20%. I'm taking the risk." "Fine." The third recruit was the riskiest. Eddie's nephew, Danny Morrow, 24 years old, tech school dropout, living in his parents' basement and spending his days gaming and freelancing as a web developer. Danny was smart with computers, good with technical details, but lacked direction and ambition. Eddie needed someone who could help with the RFID encoding, someone who could manage the technical side without asking too many questions. Eddie visited Danny on a Saturday afternoon. Danny's room was exactly what you'd expect. Posters on the walls, empty energy drink cans, 3 monitors on a desk surrounded by computer parts. "Uncle Eddie, what's up?" "I need tech help. Pays well." Danny swiveled in his chair. "What kind of tech?" "RFID encoding, programming chips, research work." "For what?" "A project. You in or not?" Danny shrugged. He needed money. His parents were threatening to kick him out. Freelance work was slow. "What's the pay?" $10,000 up front. More if it works." Danny's eyes widened. "I'm in." The operation ramped up slowly. Eddie was careful, methodical. He never got greedy, never rushed. He treated it like any maintenance job. Follow the process, check the work, don't cut corners. He'd seen too many people in his life fail because they got sloppy, because they thought they were smarter than the system. Eddie knew better. The system always had teeth. You had to move carefully. In the first month, July 2021, they moved $200,000 in counterfeit chips. Nicole cashed $50,000 at the Belmont bar during her closing shifts, blending the chips with her legitimate tips and game payouts. Tom played another $100,000 through slot machines at 4 different casinos, spreading his play over weeks to avoid patterns. Danny helped Eddie encode $50,000 worth of chips with serial numbers pulled from the disposal system, working late nights in his parents' basement while they slept upstairs. The money was split according to their agreement. Nicole got her 25%, Tom got 20, Danny got 10, Eddie kept 45%, which after expenses for materials and equipment left him with about $70,000. More money than he'd seen in years. More money than he'd made in the past 5 years combined. Eddie remembered the moment he paid off his first credit card. He'd been carrying that debt for 8 years, minimum payments that never touched the principal, interest compounding monthly. He logged into the account at 2 in the morning, transferred the full balance, and watched the number go to zero. He sat there in his apartment, staring at the screen, and felt something he hadn't felt since before Claire got sick. Relief. Pure, simple relief. By August, they'd moved $500,000. By September, $1.2 million. The process was smooth, almost routine. The chips scanned as legitimate every single time. The casino accounting system showed no discrepancies. The disposal system continued feeding Eddie valid RFID codes every 2 weeks like clockwork. They developed rituals. Every Monday, the team would meet briefly at a diner off the strip, the kind of place that served breakfast 24 hours and didn't ask questions. They'd sit in a back booth, order coffee, and review the week. How many chips moved? Any close calls? What felt safe? What felt risky? I cashed $12,000 last week, Nicole would say, keeping her voice low. Had a new cage manager Tuesday night. She scanned everything twice. Made me nervous. Did she say anything? Eddie would ask. No, but she looked at me longer than usual. We should ease off the Belmont for a bit. Agreed. Tom, how's your end? Tom would shrug, stirring sugar into his coffee with hands that trembled slightly. Good. Played the Stardust, the Golden Palace, and that new place downtown. No heat. Nobody looks twice at an old guy playing video poker. Keep it that way, Danny. Danny, usually half asleep, would pull up data on his phone. Encoded 800 chips this week. Serial numbers are clean. No duplicates. We've got enough inventory to run for another 2 months at current volume. They had rules they followed religiously. Never cash more than $5,000 at one location. Never hit the same casino twice in the same week unless it was massive and crowded. Always blend chip cash outs with other transactions. Never drive to multiple casinos in one night. Never discuss the operation on phones or computers. Never show patterns. Nicole would finish her bar shift at 2 a.m., exhausted from 8 hours of mixing drinks and dodging handsy customers. She'd cash out her tips and the poker chip change from players who'd left chips on the bar, slipping in Eddie's counterfeits with the rest. 5 here, 10 there. Never enough to look unusual. The cashiers were tired, processing dozens of transactions, scanning chips automatically. They never looked twice at a bartender cashing out at the end of her shift. Tom would wander between casinos, playing video poker for hours, feeding in Eddie's chips along with real ones, building a profile as a regular low-stakes gambler. He'd nurse beers, chat with slot attendants he'd known for decades, tip cocktail waitresses. He looked like what he was, a retired casino worker killing time and chasing small wins. When he cashed out, the chips were mixed from multiple sessions, multiple machines. No pattern, no reason for suspicion. Danny stayed home, improving the counterfeits, ordering better equipment with Eddie's money, refining the RFID encoding process. He built a database tracking which serial numbers they'd used, which were still available, which disposal batches were coming up. He created a scheduling system that optimized when to cash chips based on casino shift changes and surveillance rotations. He never asked where the chips came from. He knew, obviously, but they never discussed it explicitly. It was safer that way. Eddie kept working his normal shifts at the Belmont, maintaining the infrastructure that was quietly making him rich. He'd clock in at 11 p.m., do his rounds, fix leaky faucets, clear drains, replace washers, and twice a month he'd access the disposal system during his 3 a.m. break, when the sub-basement was empty except for the hum of machinery and the distant sound of slot machines 3 floors above. The bypass pipe he'd installed looked like standard plumbing, a junction with a shut-off valve and access panel, the kind of thing you'd see in any commercial building. Nobody questioned it. Why would they? Eddie was the plumber. He'd been maintaining this building for 15 years. If he installed a pipe, it was because the pipe was needed. By December 2021, They'd moved over $5 million in counterfeit chips. Eddie paid off his medical debt, the $78,000 that had been crushing him for years. He paid off his credit cards, all 6 of them. He bought a used Ford F-150 that actually ran, that didn't need a jump start every morning, that had heat in the winter. He put $15,000 in a savings account, money he didn't touch, just like knowing was there. For the first time in years, he could breathe. For the first time since Claire died, Eddie Morrow felt like he had a future. But success breeds confidence, and confidence breeds mistakes. In January 2022, Eddie decided to scale up. The operation was running smoothly. Nobody had noticed anything. The risk seemed minimal compared to the reward. Instead of intercepting 30 chips every 2 weeks, he started intercepting 60, then 80, then 100. The counterfeit operation was producing chips faster than they could safely cash them. Eddie rented a storage unit in North Las Vegas, paid cash for 6 months up front, and started stockpiling chips. Boxes of them, organized by denomination, wrapped in plastic, ready to move when the opportunity arose. Nicole warned him during one of their Monday meetings. "We're moving too much. I'm cashing $5,000 twice a week now. That's $10,000 weekly from one bartender. That's not normal. Someone's going to notice." Eddie sipped his coffee. "Nobody's noticed yet. The system accepts the chips. They're scanning as legitimate. We're fine." "Eddie, I'm serious. I've got bills paid for the first time in my life. My kids have new clothes. I'm not trying to be greedy. I'm trying to be smart. We need to slow down." "We're fine," Eddie repeated, his tone firmer now. "Just keep doing what you're doing. Nothing changes." Tom spoke up, his voice gravelly from years of cigarettes. "Eddie, I've been around casinos my whole life. I've seen advantage players get caught. I've seen counting teams broken up. You know what gets them? Not bad luck, not security, success. They win too much, too consistently, and the casinos start looking closer. We're having success. That means we're on borrowed time. Then we make the most of the time we have," Eddie said. "I didn't spend 20 years crawling through casino basements to quit when things are finally working." Danny looked up from his phone. "Mathematically, Tom's right. We're approaching a statistical threshold where the casino's variance analysis might flag anomalies. But we can mitigate that by distributing more broadly. Hit smaller casinos, tribal properties, places with less sophisticated surveillance." "Exactly," Eddie said. "We adapt. We don't quit." But they weren't adapting fast enough. In February, a routine audit at the Belmont flagged a small anomaly. The chip inventory showed slightly more chips in circulation than had been manufactured. Not a lot. Maybe 2% variance, within acceptable margins for accounting error. The auditor made a note, flagged it for review, and moved on. In March, another flag. Certain RFID codes were showing up in transaction logs weeks after they were supposed to have been destroyed. A cage manager noticed that a chip scanned on a Monday had been marked for disposal 3 weeks earlier. She mentioned it to her supervisor. The supervisor checked the database, saw it was probably a sync error, and made a note to have IT review the disposal system's integration. The flags were small, individually meaningless, but they were accumulating in the system, creating a pattern that someone would eventually notice. In April, Eddie's bypass pipe started showing stress fractures. He'd installed it quickly 2 years earlier, using PVC pipe rated for residential use, not commercial. It was good enough for low-volume flow, but 20 months of continuous use, thermal expansion and contraction, pressure fluctuations, and the weight of thousands of chips passing through had weakened the joints. Eddie noticed some moisture around the connection point during a routine check. He told himself he'd fix it next week. He was busy. The operation was demanding more time. He had chips to encode, serial numbers to track, money to move. He'd fix the pipe when he had a spare shift. He never got the chance. On May 7, 2022, at 3:15 in the morning, during a scheduled chip disposal flush, the bypass pipe burst. The rupture was catastrophic. The weakened joint failed completely, spraying water and chips across the maintenance corridor in a pressurized fountain. Hundreds of chips, maybe thousands, shot out of the broken pipe, scattered across the floor, washed into the main sewer system. The pressure sent them flooding through connecting pipes, up through drain systems, backing up into restrooms 3 floors above. Eddie wasn't even working that night. He'd swapped shifts with another plumber named Torres, needing a weekend off to help Danny move some equipment to a new storage location. Torres was the one who discovered the burst, standing in the sub-basement at 3:30 a.m., staring at thousands of casino chips floating in ankle-deep water, and thinking this was the strangest thing he'd seen in 23 years of plumbing work. By 4 a.m., every toilet in the West Wing was backing up. Housekeeping staff found chips everywhere. Guests were calling the front desk complaining about water and strange objects coming up through their drains. Security was called. Management was called. And within an hour, Carlos Mendoza was standing in the sub-basement, looking at the burst pipe, looking at the chips, and knowing with absolute certainty that Eddie Morrow had done something very, very wrong. The burst happened at 3:15 a.m. on a Saturday. Eddie wasn't even working that night. He'd swapped shifts with another plumber, needing a weekend off to help Danny move equipment. The pipe ruptured in the sub-basement, spraying water and chips across the maintenance corridor. Hundreds of chips, maybe thousands, flooding back into the main sewer system. The pressure sent them shooting through connecting pipes, up through drain systems, backing up into restrooms 3 floors above. By the time maintenance discovered the burst, casino chips were clogging toilets, sinks, and floor drains across the entire West Wing. Housekeeping staff found them floating in standing water. Guests were complaining. Security was called. Carlos Mendoza was the first maintenance supervisor on scene. He saw the burst pipe, saw the chips, and immediately knew something was wrong. Chips didn't belong in the plumbing, and this many chips, this high a denomination, meant someone had tampered with the system. He called security. Sharon Vasquez arrived with her team. They pulled up the sewer grate and found thousands more chips jammed in the main drain. They started scanning RFID codes. That's when they found the discrepancy. The codes were valid. They matched chips in the Belmont's inventory system. But when they cross-referenced the serial numbers with disposal logs, they saw that many of these chips had been marked for destruction months ago. They should have been out of the system. They should have been shredded and flushed. Instead, they were intact and active. Sharon ordered a full review of security footage. They pulled up recordings from the disposal chute access points, and there on camera was Eddie Morrow, working alone at 3 a.m. on multiple occasions, accessing the disposal system during times when he shouldn't have been there, spending extended periods in areas he had no reason to be. They pulled Eddie's access logs. His badge had been used to enter restricted areas 47 times in the past 6 months, always during his scheduled shifts, always during periods when surveillance was light. They opened Eddie's locker in the maintenance office. Inside, they found a tool bag with 3 counterfeit chips wrapped in a cloth, hidden behind his spare uniform. They found a notebook with RFID codes written in columns. They found receipts for resin and printing supplies. Sharon called the FBI. By 8 a.m., there was a warrant for Eddie Morrow's arrest. By 9 a.m., FBI agents were at his apartment in Henderson. The door was locked. Nobody answered. They got a key from the landlord. Inside, the apartment was clean. Too clean. Eddie's clothes were gone. His computer was gone. The only thing left was furniture and a few dishes in the sink. Eddie Morrow had vanished. The FBI investigation moved fast. They identified the team within 48 hours. Nicole Chen was arrested at her apartment Sunday morning, still in her pajamas, her 2 kids watching cartoons in the living room. She didn't resist. She didn't say anything except, "I want a lawyer." Tom Webb was picked up at a casino Monday afternoon, sitting at his usual video poker machine with a stack of chips in front of him. Some of them were counterfeits. He looked at the agents and said, "I knew this was coming." Danny Morrow was arrested at his parents' house Tuesday morning. His room was full of equipment: 3D printers, RFID encoders, boxes of chips in various stages of completion. He cooperated immediately, turning over files, records, everything Eddie had asked him to create. But Eddie himself was gone. His truck was found abandoned near Lake Mead on Sunday afternoon, 3 days after the pipe burst. The doors were unlocked. His wallet was inside, along with his phone and a spare set of clothes. No signs of struggle, no blood, no note. The FBI dredged part of the lake. They searched hiking trails. They checked border crossings, airports, bus stations. They put out a national alert with Eddie's photo and description. Nothing. Rumors started spreading. Some people said Eddie drowned in the lake, weighing himself down with his tool bag, choosing death over prison. Others said he'd planned his escape for months, that the abandoned truck was misdirection, that he'd crossed into Mexico with fake ID and enough cash to disappear forever. Casino workers had their own theories. Some said Eddie was a folk hero, the blue-collar guy who outsmarted the billion-dollar casinos. Others said he was a thief who'd stolen from the house and deserved whatever happened to him. Weeks passed, then months. No body, no sightings, no confirmed leads. Then 6 weeks after Eddie's disappearance, a plumber working in Reno reported finding something strange. He'd been called to clear a chronic clog in an old apartment building's main drain. Deep in the pipe system, sealed inside a length of PVC, he found a waterproof bag containing casino chips. Thousands of them. Belmont chips, mostly. All counterfeits. The FBI examined the site. The pipe had been modified recently, sometime in the past few months. Someone with plumbing knowledge had created a cache, a hidden stash accessible only if you knew exactly where to look. They never found Eddie, but they found 12 more caches like that one, scattered across Nevada, Arizona, and California. Storage units, buried pipes, hidden compartments, and maintenance spaces. All told, they recovered about $8 million in counterfeit chips that Eddie had stockpiled but never cashed. The rest, nearly $23 million worth, had entered circulation and might never be recovered. The trial for Nicole, Tom, and Danny was relatively straightforward. All three pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit fraud and money laundering. Nicole got 3 years probation and restitution requirements, mostly because she cooperated and had children. Tom got 18 months in federal prison. Danny got 2 years probation and community service because he agreed to testify about the technical methods. The casinos faced a crisis. The Belmont alone lost approximately $9.7 million before insurance covered the rest. But the bigger problem was trust. If one plumber could counterfeit 30 million in chips using basic equipment and access to the maintenance system, what else was vulnerable? Within 3 months, every major casino in Nevada replaced their entire chip inventory. New designs, new RFID encryption, new disposal systems with multiple verification steps, and physical shredders that actually worked. The industry spent an estimated $200 million on the upgrade. For months after the bust, gamblers unknowingly played with Eddie's counterfeits still in circulation. The chips passed through thousands of hands, crossed dozens of casinos, and eventually filtered out of the system. But some remained. Collectors started trading them online, calling them plumber chips or Morrow specials. They became oddly valuable, not for their face value, but as artifacts of the most audacious casino fraud in modern Vegas history. The FBI kept the case open. Eddie Morrow remained on their wanted list. His photo was in airports, border crossings, law enforcement bulletins. But as years passed, the active search wound down. Eddie became another unsolved case, another ghost story in Vegas folklore. To the casinos, Eddie Morrow was a cautionary tale about insider threats and overlooked vulnerabilities. To blue-collar workers across the service industry, he became something else, a folk hero, the quiet guy who got tired of being invisible and decided to take what the system owed him, the man who outsmarted billion-dollar corporations with a wrench, a printer, and access to the one place nobody was watching, the pipes.